Hi there, everyone. Welcome to another of these image review sessions. This one is in April 2022, and actually, unusually, is only focuses on photos from one trip, the most recent trip I did, which was at the end of March, beginning of April, a week doing the classic sort of north central atolls of the Maldives, sort of north and south Malay Atoll, north and south Ari Atoll, and a few other surrounding dives around there. So I've only just begun processing some of the trip pictures from that trip, because after that trip I went away on a family holiday for a couple of weeks, and I've only just started to have a look at some of the pictures. So this is kind of a first pass of images. Often on the first pass, I have to say I favour pictures that are going to be very quick to process rather than necessarily going to be my favourites, just so I can get some pictures done and ready to share a little bit. I've not actually had the chance to share any of these on social media yet. I've actually not got my phone at the moment. It's been being repaired, so I can't share anything on Instagram. So I thought I'd record one of these videos for YouTube. So we started off the trip diving around Mali Atoll, and you can see, those who know the Maldives will recognise straight away these moray eels from the dive site called Fish Factory, which is a tuna factory where they dump the carcasses, the bones of the tuna, into the water. And as a result, it attracts a huge amount of marine life. And it's a not particularly attractive dive, but it's a very photographically productive dive. And I like to do it usually twice on my workshops in the Maldives, because it's one of those dive sites that's just got subject matter everywhere. There's loads and loads of moray eels, there's loads and loads of schooling fish, there's big Jenkins whiptail rays there, and there's lots to see and photograph. So these shots here are actually taken on my second dive of the trip. I haven't processed any pictures from the first dive yet, and these are shots taken with the Nauticam EMWL1 lens. You can see at the bottom of the screen here these moray eels. We're going to work our way up in sort of chronological order. So this is a pair of morays coming out of a hole. There's a golden tail moray and a honeycomb moray. This is actually was actually very nearby, but just a little bit further away. Just a single honeycomb moray. I kind of feel they, with the EMWL one, they look a little bit like sock puppets, which I kind of like and kind of don't like. I quite like this one with its mouth just slightly open. It's quite a comical, smiling face, which I think kind of quite cartoonish, which that lens tends to lend itself to. The next one is a vertical shot using the lens, kind of creating this kind of dramatic moray reaching up in front of the rock. I'd love to have been able to light this more selectively and really light the moray and have a black rock behind it. That would look fantastic. But that was just too tricky with the setup that I had on that particular dive. But it would have been great to I think to go back and shoot this lens a bit more with some inward lighting. I think it would suit the lens really well, and something I'm planning to do more in the future. There's a discussion thread on WetPixel at the moment about the sharpness of this lens, and yes, it's not as sharp as the like a WACP one or something like that, but for me it's a very sharp lens. Certainly for what it does, and I think anyone who's ever used any sort of pro bug eye lens, fisheye relay lens in the past will be blown away by how sharp it is. I mean, I'll zoom in and look at this. Is it 100? Is it 100 or 200%? I'm looking at this now. It's not telling me on the screen, but I think it might be 200%. These shots are taken with the 21 megapixel D5, which I used on this trip. And that for me, that eye is lovely and sharp. The teeth are nice and sharp. I don't have a big issue with the image quality that this lens is producing. This is actually a photo of me using the lens. This picture was taken by Neil Rosewarne, one of the people on the trip, one of my friends, and just a picture of me with the whiptail rays. This is not the classic way I would use the lens. I've been shooting moray eels all dive, and I just thought I'd have some fun trying some other subjects with it at the end of the dive, which weren't particularly effective. It doesn't do anything particularly interesting with those subjects. But nonetheless, I just had a play with it at the end of the dive. So I would normally shoot it with the strobes certainly a lot closer into the lens so that it can really light on the end of the lens. That's kind of the aim of it. But that at least shows you what the lens looks like. I can zoom in a little bit. You can see the end of the lens there, and my strobes on either side. Right. Another shot with the MWL one. This is taken, I guess, maybe a day or two later. I haven't processed all the pictures from all the dives yet. This was taken in Ari Atoll on a site that we went to because it had a resident frogfish, it had nice red anemones, and a variety of good kind of more macro-y subjects. I certainly like when I run the Maldives trips to hit some of the dive sites that maybe the normal tourist boats don't go to, because they may be a little bit tame for kind of the divers who want to go and sort of go deep and hook in the strong current and see sharks in the distance, or go on a big long drift dive. Neither of those are particularly productive photographically for underwater photographers. So we tend to mix some of the classic Tila sites in with a few kind of more sort of pedestrian sites, but ones which tend to be photographically very productive. And I find that gives a very good balance to the trip, so that people aren't doing that. Anyway, this moray was on that trip. I actually processed this picture. Yeah, it's zooming them to 200%. I actually processed this picture with super resolution, but I've actually now down resed it again, because I only did that just to be able to share what the super resolution picture looked like. So it's actually now back down at 20 megapixels. Although it's been super resed and then down resed again. Just I didn't feel the need to keep the big file. 20 megapixels is more than enough. This is on one of the dives seeing the grey reef sharks. Grey reef sharks, always nice to see. They're kind of a classic reef shark. Taken unbaited, so not necessarily, super dramatic type on the dome type images, but with the zooming ability of the WACP lens, able to get nice frame filling shots nice and easily, and quite natural shots. So not an amazing image, this one, but certainly one that I'm happy to have a little bit of coverage of those species, because I think for any, certainly for an article on the Maldives, seeing grey reef sharks is something that all divers are going to remember as part of the trip. So you need, as a photographer, need some coverage of those subjects. Right, onto these mantas. These are shot with the fisheye, the Nikonos 13mm RS fisheye, on a night dive, and we were very lucky on this particular night. We had mantas turn up at dusk and stay with us all through the night, feeding on the plankton attracted to the lights of the boat. And then as a night dive, we went down and set our torches up in a line on the seabed, and each torch creates a little pocket of plankton. Anyone who's dived at nights knows that plankton likes, crowding round a dive torch. And mantas love feeding on concentrated plankton, so the mantas would swim down this line and give us a chance to shoot them. I thought, actually, before the dive, that I'd do more shots without flash, because I thought the interesting light of the mantas swimming through the beams of light would be interesting. But actually, I was very glad I kept my strobes on the camera, because I think my favourite shots are all pretty much with strobe. I think being able to bring that white out of the manta at night, while still getting the nice green of the murky water that this lagoon is, and also the light from the boat and the light from the torches into the pictures is something that I think is really interesting. It's nice to see the mantas this close. They're kind of quite cool. Nice. They're all kind of very same shots, but nice and sharp. There's quite a lot of plankton in the water and that sort of thing, but I think they give a nice effect. There's quite a lot more of these to process. After that dive, we then actually came up to the surface, and went snorkeling with the mantas, swimming around in the beams of light from the lights on the dive boat. And that also yielded, I think, some very artistic images. And my friend Lilian, who enjoys processing my photos in black and white for fun, he's actually got most of these files at the moment, and has actually processed quite a few of them, and he's actually already had the first set of prints made. But I haven't got those raw files. I haven't got those files to share. But there's some very nice black and white versions of some of these encounters. Right, the next day, now we're still in Ari Atoll, diving some of the Tila dives. These are Hawksbill turtles on fish head. That dive site's always full of hawksbills. It's full of great schooling action, and also lots of hawksbill turtles on top of the reef. So it's a really, really productive site. We only did it once on this trip, which I kind of regret because it's so good. But we always normally do it twice on the workshop trips. But nonetheless, I think it's yielded some nice images. This is the same hawksbill. One shot here, this first shot here, is it posing in a bit of a portrait. It's got its mouth open because it was busy eating the zoanthids, which they love to eat in the Maldives. They love the zoanthids and the polyps of bubble coral and that sort of thing. So you can see he's got his mouth open here, chomping away. Shot with the WACP. And the next shot is actually one of him actually picking up one of the big chunks of coral with the zoanthids on. I'm not quite sure why he was picking it up like this. He doesn't really need to eat the zoanthids. But nonetheless, it made for quite a nice, interesting action shot of the feeding. And then on to some dives at oh gosh, the name's gone out of my head. Mayafushi, the well-known manta cleaning station on the side of Ariatoll there. We had mantas that day, but not particularly good action. No decent photos. For me anyway. Maybe some other people in better positions, but none for me. But I love going to that cleaning station because it is just so packed with fish. And even if you don't get mantas, you can always get nice pictures there. Particularly if there's a bit of current and it lines the fish up nicely. This mixed school of snappers, of oriental sweet lips, or the one-spot snappers, the oriental sweet lips, and then those squirrel fish, saber squirrels at the bottom. Really nice mixed school of fish. Very Maldives, full of, just packed with big fish everywhere. Really nice to see. And actually in the background, there's a big school of blue striped snappers. There's some paddle tail snappers. There's lots and lots going on in this picture. And although it's not, a particularly striking composition, I really like this type of shot in the Maldives. It captures Maldives diving for me. That evening, we tried to do a dust dive, actually, to get evening sunlight, but we just were running a little bit late during the day, and we ended up getting in the water about 20 minutes after the best light. The light was just finishing as we got in, but it meant we did a shallow reef dive in quite dark conditions, and it was ideal for doing spin shots, panning shots, that sort of thing. And this is a spin shot on a table coral. That night we went to, there's probably a better photo to start this with. It's a photo of me. That night we went to one of the other anchorages where the lights of the boat attract plankton, and those plankton, instead of attracting mantas, attracted whale sharks. And this is a photo of me taken with a phone, leaning over the back of the boat, taking a snap of this great whale shark. And I think this is a nicer shot than any of the shots I got. I think the story of the photographers leaning over the boat, shooting the whale shark, is actually a cooler photo than the actual photo I was taking. But it was cool, and some of us went in the water. You can see, I think that's Neil in the background there, Andy here, and me photographing the whale shark here. Anyway, I've only processed a couple of shots of these so far. There's quite a few. I quite like this one just for the mouth appearing out of the darkness. I've photographed whale sharks lots in the daytime, so I like the darkness in these shots of this kind of almost here you've got this kind of ring where the inside the mouth it goes to blackness, and outside the mouth it goes to blackness, and then just in front it's just millions and millions of little probably mysid shrimps in the water. I might have to zoom in and see if I can see what type of shrimps they are. No, I can't. Probably mysids. And then this is a photo actually taken in the water. We didn't have particularly good encounters that day with the whale sharks. They arrived in the middle of the night. The first one disappeared before any of us got in the water. And then just as we were about to give up and all go back to bed, another one arrived and hung around again for a relatively short amount of time. Again, then left us again. There were a lot of dolphins around that night. A lot of bottlenose dolphins, and when you're in the water you could hear them echolocating. It was kind of that brrr, brrr, which was really interesting to hear. And so I think that probably put the sharks a little bit more on edge, and they'd come and feed for a bit, but they didn't really ever get settled into just that hardcore, what they call in Mexico, botella, bottle feeding, where they kind of end up vertical in the water, just gulping and gulping and gulping down food. And almost go into kind of a trance in that state, and you can just swim around them and do whatever you want photographically. We never quite got to that stage, so it was wonderful to see them, and always amazing to see whale sharks, but not as we had all our luck, I think, with the mantas the day before. This is another nice fishy Maldives shot. I always try and shoot a lot of this kind of fish action in the Maldives. I think it really tells the story of the place. I quite, and particularly when the fish schools react, when there's predators around and they all dive in one direction, or fusiliers stream up the reef. I think those critical key moments really make these pictures come alive. This is some of the new table coral growth at Rangali Madivaru, which is up in the shallows there. These table corals are very fast growing. It's fantastic to see the coral growing like this. I think sometimes divers tend to be a bit over impressed by this and think, wow, look at that amazing coral growth, isn't that fantastic? And it does look beautifully pristine because it's all new growth, in the same way that my garden right now looks beautifully pristine because it's those first perfect sproutings of the plants. But this, in reality, is actually quite a monoculture. It's not a particularly diverse coral reef environment. It's all kind of one type of coral, all growing in a way. It will start to break down, as the table corals get bigger. But at this stage, it's all growing neatly. I was on the trip. I was sort of saying to the people, it's a little bit like a field of stinging nettles. Something that's just kind of the first plants to colonize after an area has been disturbed. And this is a little bit like that with the table corals. Great to see them growing, but this is not a healthy, mature, biodiverse coral reef. This is just high coral cover from one species. And it's important just to understand that. This is far better than bare rock, but this is the first step of recovery. This isn't recovery. Right. And there's a couple of shots of that. This is one here, the diver in to see the scale of this. Really fantastic to drift over this in the current. Just this incredible, patterns of all these big table corals growing there. Right. This next dive from another Tila dive, where on the Tila, whose name just escapes me just this minute. I can't quite put my finger on it. Anyway, many of you who dive South Ariatoll will know this Tila very well. It's the small Tila with millions and millions of these blue stripe snappers on there. It's a dive we did twice during this trip because it's always very productive photographically. We didn't have the best visibility on our dives there. It was kind of relatively clear, just not very relatively particle free, so it wasn't backscattery, but it was quite murky with it. So it wasn't the best photographic conditions, but the snappers were behaving and gave lots of opportunity for photos. I've actually only processed one so far. And then in the evening we went to a dive site, a shallow site, which is called Turtle Tila, which just I think is a sort of more of a dive site used by the local islands than the liverboards normally. But we went there for a sunset dive, a late afternoon, our fourth dive of the day. And that dive, the shallow parts of that dive are home to lots and lots of young hawksbill turtles. And it was a great opportunity to shoot those up in shallow water. And in fact, I used the EMWL bug eye lens again for that. And able to get these I was trying to get shots of them feeding. I haven't actually processed any of the feeding shots yet because they're quite messy with all the feeding. This is just taken a mouthful. But the bug eye lens really enabled me to get, I think, some quite unusual perspectives really in and amongst these small hawksbill turtles. So I was quite happy to get those shots. And then the next dive was just the next one I've processed are pictures from a fish photography dive. Just a nice 3-spot angel and a double saddle butterfly fish, and then a pair of these small surgeonfish. I can't remember what they're called now. But they're quite a common fish in the Maldives. They look like the big surgeons that you see cruising everywhere, but these are the small ones. I might even have the name on them actually. I'll just check what the name is because I'm sure I've tagged it. Pale surgeonfish they're called. Right, and then I've only processed one picture from our dive in Manta at the jetty there. Rather than diving it at night now, people seem to be diving it more during the day, and it was quite nice to dive it as a very late afternoon dive, have blue water, and have a chance for some different types of images. I've just processed this one. I quite like the relationship between these two sharks. This is actually a young one that was sort of making a mess over all the adults, kept clambering all over them, and it was quite funny to see. So that was just a picture of him. And no, I have processed one other picture from the Alimata dive. It was just this one of a black-tip reef shark. Black-tip reef sharks are common, but very rarely get the chance to photograph them. So I just made sure I processed that one to have some coverage of that. And then the final couple of pictures I'm going to show you. This is just a fire goby, just a pretty little fish. Very characteristic of these kind of sloping sides of the Tilas or sloping outer reef walls in the Maldives, usually in pairs. This one was part of a pair, but the other one had gone back into its hole by this point as I was trying to get closer for the photos. But this was still a nice pose. He kind of looks at me, I think, a little bit warily in this picture. But I like the pose and the colour. And I've not had the chance to often shoot one against a black background like this, which I think really shows off the colours. And this is on the same dive, same macro fish portrait dive. This was a Forster's or freckled hawkfish, which had just snared a young Amphius and was busy eating it up. And I got this portrait of them. I wasn't really sure what way to go on depth of field of this. I think I probably would have liked more depth of field and to have had both of them sharp. But because it was in this very lumpy, bumpy coral, I was very worried that that coral would be really distracting as a background. So I probably opened the aperture a little bit more than I probably would like to for this shot. Let's have a look at what we shot it at. So shot at f14, but it's quite high magnification, which is why I've got such narrow depth of field. I probably would have been better off maybe f16, f22, something like that, just to try and get the face of the Amphius a little bit sharper. I have got other shots where they're sharper, but it's not such a dramatic angle. What was quite interesting about this is that this coral actually had the red coral gobies, the same as the lemon coral gobies we photographed in the Red Sea, living in it. And that goby kept running out and trying to steal the Amphius off the hawkfish. And I've actually got photos of the two of them side by side, but I've not had a chance to process those yet. But I did share one on Instagram actually around the time, on Instagram stories. I don't know if it's, I guess it won't be up there anymore, but with the goby in, which was pretty cool. Right. Oh, and then, yeah, just finally then, some eagle rays, always a favourite species in the Maldives to get. Not always that cooperative, but this was just a nice photo of a few of them. I don't quite think the formation is quite right here in this picture. It's not particularly balanced. And also the main eagle ray, that one in the top, this one here, is probably the ugliest of the four eagle rays. This one is beautiful, and it'd be nice if he was a little bit more front and center. Eagle rays do vary a great deal on their body patterns. So yeah, it's interesting to see. I given how much spotted eagle rays vary, I do wonder whether the very rarely seen ornate eagle ray isn't perhaps just a variety of spotted eagle rays. It's hard to know. But just given how much they vary, you can't, you look at the patterning underneath this fin here, that's not so far away from the top surface of an ornate eagle ray. Anyway, I'm sure they are separate species, but it's just, given how much normal spotted eagle rays vary, and given that spotted eagle rays can develop patterns quite similar to ornate eagle rays, it doesn't seem too far a stretch to wonder whether ornate eagle rays are just rare individuals of spotted eagle rays. Anyway, I'm sure I'm wrong about that, but I thought it was a fun point to raise. Anyway, that's a quick scan through what I've recently shot in the Maldives. I hope that was interesting. I'm going to stop my video now. Thanks for watching.